All right. There is so much good evidence out there now pointing towards, what we can learn about moms in pregnancy. And I'm so excited to have Margie Davenport on today to chat with us a little bit about what she's been doing in the pregnancy and postpartum research space. Thanks so much, Margie, for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, thanks so much for having me. It's great to speak with you this morning.
Yeah, it's an afternoon for me, but it's been a great day so far. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you are and kind of what got you into working with pregnancy and postpartum and research.
Sure. So I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology, Sport and Recreation at the University of Alberta. So we're up in Edmonton, Canada. What got me into this area? So I was a national team athlete, way back a couple of decades ago now. And so I was really interested in physical activity and exercise. But my family also has a strong history of obesity and diabetes. So I thought way back when I was in my early 20s that I'd be trying to tackle that particular issue. But the only person who was working in my faculty at that point in time in the area was an individual who was doing research with pregnancy. And so at that point in time, I had no interest in pregnancy. I was early 20s. Until I started to work with her. And I have to say, I fell in love with right from day one, working with pregnant ladies. I always talk about the physiology. So I'm an exercise physiologist. I'm really keen to know more about how the body works and how it changes with pregnancy. And pregnancy is one of the most interesting times in a woman's life. Over the 9 short months of pregnancy, blood volume is going up by 50% and the heart is getting bigger. And all of these changes, you don't see it in any other time in your life. And so I got really excited with that. That was over 20 years ago now.
Oh my goodness.
And so I've continued with my training and 10 years ago set up the program for pregnancy and postpartum health in Alberta. So we're almost at our 10-year anniversary now.
That's amazing. And to have more research, I think that's one of the things that my kids are a little bit older now. I have 11 and an soon to be 9-year-old. And I remember even then, there wasn't that much stuff out there. I feel like there's been a flurry the last several years, but for you to have set that program up 10 years ago, there was some forethought going on there, wasn't there?
No, I have to say, it's a really exciting time to be in the research field of pregnancy and postpartum. There are some major changes that have happened over the last couple of years and some bigger changes that are coming forward.
Yeah. And I feel like it's right now, especially too, to have so many of our elite female athletes. I mean, Serena, she just, I think she's retired now, Allison Felix, all of these moms stepping up and performing and kind of bringing that conversation to the forefront. I really feel like it's such a nice combo, now that we're starting to get a little bit more data coming in. So great job planning that out according with all these other athletes' retirement schedules. Good job. So I wanted to start with this question because I think that there's a little bit of lack of understanding, not only from those of us who are clinicians, but also from just moms in general, because we want to be educated as moms. We want to be educated as providers. We're like, where's the research in pregnancy? It's really hard to conduct research in pregnancy. You want to talk a little bit about kind of what those barriers are and challenges are trying to gather data in pregnancy and then carry it through even to the postpartum space.
Mm-hmm. So, pregnancy is this really special time where, you're growing a new life. And so, of course, you're going to have concern for the baby. And one of the hardest things that we find is that, when we're trying to start to push the boundaries of our understanding of physical activity and exercise during pregnancy, when we're looking at high intensity exercise, when we're looking at long duration exercise, a lot of times what we're doing is we're starting to push into the unknown a little bit. Yeah. We know that women are still engaging in HIIT exercise during pregnancy, but there is no evidence supporting the inclusion of HIIT training during pregnancy. Now, caveat to that, we have a paper that was just accepted, so that's going to be coming out in the next couple of days.
Yay!
It's changing, right? But it only changes when we are able to do these types of studies. And so what we often run into is that we have these long-standing, often theoretical, but sometimes based on very small early studies, which suggest that potentially engaging in really high intensity or long duration or heavy lifting, those types of exercises might not be beneficial for pregnant individuals. And so the unfortunate thing is that sometimes when we have these limitations on what pregnant individuals are told that they can or should be doing, it prevents researchers from being able to start to do those studies that are pushing the boundaries a little bit more. So as an example, and I have colleagues in the United Kingdom, they're not able to do any exercise assessments above 70% of maximal intensity, which quite frankly is actually quite low. Yeah. And in North America, we're frequently doing studies up to about 80%, but we still have that gap between 80 and sort of maximal effort where we have such limited information. So, that's quite a large barrier. Yeah. You're asking specifically about high-level athletes. Up until the trailblazers of Alison Felix, Serena Williams, we really didn't see that many women who were pregnant training and competing at the high level. They were so few and far between that, even to be able to get any basic information about those individuals was almost impossible. We didn't know about it. People weren't coming to our door and knocking and saying, hey, I'm pregnant. I want to keep training. Will you do assessments on me? Or just, record what my training volume is. Yeah. But that's changing. So we're now being contacted by these high level elite athletes that are saying, I have my training logs. These are my birth outcomes. Can you do anything with it? Can I help the next generation?
I love that. I love that.
It's a really exciting time, but it's all because of the attention that people like Alison Felix have really brought to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I think there's this misnomer that, when you're pregnant, you think, oh gosh, well, these elite athletes, they must be getting the best possible care and they must have all the answers. And the fact of the matter is they were patching it together like the rest of us were. And purely, like, if you did look at the data, it really was just on fetal outcomes. It wasn't necessarily looking at, maternal health other than, basic physiological stuff. It wasn't necessarily looking at, the stuff that we're interested as far as, pelvic floor and whatnot. And to your point too, like, this is all new that these women are coming forward because of all the barriers that they had. So they're not only trying to patch this stuff together themselves, they were also trying to keep their jobs. Now they're actually, using this for a platform and moving it forward. Like, it's just, it's this amazing twist of like things coming together. But again, like, getting people to sign up for research, like, who's going to sign up for the study that says if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to harm your baby? Like, that's a really tough sell,
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think at the same time, if we are able to think comprehensively, what are our key questions in terms and concerns about something like high intensity or long duration activity?
Yep.
So for me, I'm less concerned about the impact to the mom because it's probably going to be minimal, but I'm very concerned about the impact to the fetus. And so conducting studies where we look specifically at the impact of high intensity activity on fetal responses, is baby doing just fine?
Yep.
Or is the baby exhibiting some form of, adverse effect?
Yeah.
And so those studies are really, really important. And until we're able to conduct those studies, we're just kind of at a loss in terms of what we do.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the first phase too. Like, again, when you're thinking about during pregnancy, you're not thinking about yourself postpartum. You're not thinking about what you're going to be doing. Your first focus is, if I eat sushi, is it going to harm the baby? If I eat a bad deli sandwich, like all of those things. So yes, I totally see where you're coming from. Like, we've got to get those first and then we'll worry about the other stuff later. Totally. Talk a little bit about, you were one of the authors on the 19 Canadian Guidelines. And I think that it was a really interesting time for that to come out too, because it was pre-pandemic and it was pre a lot of these studies now that have kind of come out since then. Can you share a little bit about kind of what the key points were in the Canadian Guidelines? I remember being super pumped when they came out because it was something. And also 2019, we had the UK running guidelines. Like, there was a lot that came out in 19. But tell us a little bit about kind of the primary points in those guidelines, and then also what feedback you've gotten and looking ahead at potentially what adjustments might need to be made.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the 2019 guidelines, we were really asking questions about, is exercise safe or is exercise beneficial for the pregnant mom and her fetus? Like those are really basic questions. And, 3-4 years on now, it's a little bit surprising that we even had those questions back then.
Right.
And so as part of the guideline, I led a team who developed 12 systematic reviews and meta-analyses, which is, sounds very simple, straightforward, but that was screening like almost 30,000 articles and then including, say, over 600 individual studies to be able to derive those guidelines. It was a massive undertaking. I'm still recovering, but it was an important process to be able to identify and provide the highest quality evidence for pregnant individuals to be able to make decisions about exercise during pregnancy. So the key take-homes that we had is that based on the evidence of the day, physical activity was safe and beneficial and encouraged for all pregnant individuals who don't have contraindications or medical reasons why they shouldn't engage in physical activity. They are encouraged to be active throughout their entire pregnancy from conception until delivery. We encouraged activity being spread over 3 or more days of the week, including a variety of different activities, including aerobic and also resistance training. But also we're one of the first to really encourage pelvic floor muscle training as well, and trying to bring that to the forefront. And so, in many ways that changed the way that pregnant individuals thought about physical activity, or at least I hope so. And it also led to the development of a new pre-participation exercise screening tool called the Get Active Questionnaire for Pregnancy. Now, that particular questionnaire was only possible because we were able to identify the safety and benefits of physical activity during pregnancy. Originally, most guidelines around the world said you have to get cleared by a healthcare professional before you become, before you begin or continue to be exercising during pregnancy. But for the vast majority of individuals, this was preventing women from exercising in early pregnancy, or even just stopping altogether during their pregnancy. And so this is a screening tool that's filled out by themselves, and basically identifies if you're at higher risk for developing these medical complications where exercise is not recommended. And so there, it's been translated into multiple languages now. It's really gaining momentum. And it's because there's such a strong appetite to be able to continue to exercise during early pregnancy if you wish to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that's such a great point. And I'm so glad that that kind of shift occurred there, because I find that, moms, especially newly pregnant, they have a ton of questions. And when the first thing is talk to your physician, well, we don't go to the doctor that often anyway. And to get those appointments in, you've got about 3 minutes, at least here in the States, to talk to your physician. And, if the question is like, well, what about CrossFit, or what about this, or what about that? They may not know. And so I think, just getting one of the barriers down to keep people exercising, because to your point, staying active, we know is good and healthy for the mom and the fetus. So getting good education, but also reducing barriers to participation, I think is so incredibly important. So I was really, really excited to see that. What additional feedback? It's been a few years now. People have, kind of had some time to digest. What's been the feedback that you've gotten?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, definitely there's lots of questions about, why there wasn't greater information or better prescription about resistance training during pregnancy. Simple answer is there's hardly any studies looking at resistance training during pregnancy. You need to have sufficient evidence to be able to build guidelines. If the evidence isn't there, you can't make recommendations on it, at least not in those key evidence-based recommendations. You can certainly go through, expert opinion, but there are definitely some issues and caveats with that. We had lots of questions about why pelvic floor muscle training was listed as a low quality evidence. Again, the evidence continues to build. The fact that it's in the recommendations is the key point,
Right.
not the strength or the quality of the recommendation. What else? Avoiding Olympic lifting. That's been in there for many, many years. We had lots of discussion at the panel level. There are sufficient hypothetical, theoretical concerns about heavy weightlifting during pregnancy. Olympic lifting during pregnancy. That is where researchers come in and where we need to do these studies to be able to see if these theoretical concerns are correct,
right,
or if they're just bunk. Right. And so we do have a study that's currently under review. I'm hoping to get the reviews back sooner than later, where we are looking at the impact of Olympic lifting during pregnancy. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue to build on that evidence to provide better recommendations in a subsequent version.
Yes, I would like that too. I didn't start lifting until after I had my kids, so I didn't deal with the whole bar path situation, but I can see how that might be an issue. When I'm thinking about, understanding research, not only as a clinician, but as a mom trying to look for answers and the stuff, and you want to do the right thing, I think it's so incredibly important to understand these guidelines. Like you said, it was based on, the research that was compiled up to that point. Mm-hmm. So it's, as a clinician, I see, guidelines come out and then they're kind of held in regard of, okay, this is the Bible now. And I'm like, well, guideline does not mean it's set in stone. Guideline is a guide. It's, hey, take this for what it's worth. This is a compilation of kind of what we have till this point. But I think that's where there just needs to be so much more, intermixing between clinicians and researchers on how we kind of move the ball forward and where we can, because we're the ones that have access to, the pregnant moms that are doing Olympic lifting and doing that mm-hmm. sort of thing, so that you can do the research. We've got the sources. You guys can write the papers, and that's usually where our skill sets are. But I think when stuff comes out, making sure that we are guided by the evidence, but it also, that's where I think clinical opinion comes in. And I love your thoughts as far as, and that kind of brings to the next question too. There's a lot more information out there, especially on social. There's been a huge surge in, I think, information about pregnancy, pelvic floor health, women's health, tons of voices. And the feedback that I have heard more from researchers is they're concerned about the volume of expert practice, or just the volume of, and even just like the loudness of just some of the voices out there that really, they say research says, but as a researcher that's not, true. So like when you see this stuff out there, like, what are the pros and cons of getting information out there from your perspective? Because, you're going to want to leverage this to get subjects, but also you probably see some things and cringe a little bit too, right?
Or cringe a lot. Absolutely.
All right. Unload it. Let me hear it.
So, social media is this incredibly powerful tool. When we talk about research, often, what is it, like 12 or 14 years before the research actually gets into, the general consciousness of the specific population. Whereas if I finish a study and I put it up onto my Instagram, basically that translation is happening instantaneously. Yeah. Now, not all research should be translated instantaneously. If you have, a study that is fairly small, pushing the boundaries, of what we understand, that there's potentially some issues in the way that the data was collected or the population that you're, specifically working with, and then sort of expanding it to everybody who's pregnant, that's not appropriate. And so I find that's where I become concerned with some of the things that we see on social media, is that you take this one really exciting but very small study and saying it's safe for everybody. This needs to be moved into guidelines right away. Guidelines don't work like that. We do need to have a sufficient evidence base to be able to change those guidelines to make them appropriate for the general population. And so that's where I become concerned. It's also the reason why I joined social media. I am not a natural social media
Yes, you
podcast
are.
speaker. I'm very much a researcher. And so I've been trying to build those skills because I think it's important that, that I'm able to present the message about my research and the limitations of the research that I do, but also researchers, working in other areas in pregnancy and postpartum, to make sure the message that's getting out there is appropriate and tempered appropriately as well. But at the same time, I've had this conversation many, many times. I don't have that kind of reach. I don't have the reach that you do. I don't have the way of expressing, the research in the same way as you do. You have those skills, which I'm very, very slowly building. And so it's a real balance between, having the researchers speak the message and getting the message out to the pregnant and postpartum individuals, which is where you really come in.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's such a hard, I think, line to walk, and I've seen a big change probably even in the last 4 to 6 months or so. I don't know if it's because more people are shifting over, but like even experienced clinicians calling out and being like, what is that person saying? That doesn't make any sense. They're saying it's research based and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Who are they to put it up there? And I think that's the other thing too. Like who are they to put it up there? They put it up there. So if you don't like it, then you've got to do it yourself. And it's uncomfortable. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And sometimes research isn't sexy. Like it's easier to be sensational entertaining. And I think that's the really hard line to get not only clinicians on board, but moms getting good evidence is you've got about 3 seconds to get somebody's attention. How do you get their attention, but also ensure that they have good information that you and I both know means that we read beyond the abstract? And that's, I think, one of the hardest things that I'm finding right now, and also knowing kind of our access to information in the States. Like I'm fortunate enough to be adjunct at our local university and have easy access. It's not easy for the regular clinician to access literature. So it's easier to come up with, things and just throw it out there and make it go viral. But yeah, I think there needs to be a sweet spot where, we combine our superpowers.
Absolutely.
Which is why I'm like, come on here, Margie, you have things to say. So you have a platform here. Okay. So what are the things, like, I'm going off script here. I told you I'd do that. For you, like, what are the things, like, pick 2 things out of the box that if you want moms to know that this is such an important thing, or you want clinicians to know that this is such an important thing.
In terms of exercise during pregnancy, I think the most important thing that we need to think about is we have to change our thinking away from what are the harms of being active during pregnancy to, what are the harms of not being active during pregnancy. Now, there's a big caveat to that one too. I think there's a lot of pressure and one of the things I've been trying to work on is my messaging around exercise during pregnancy. If you say it's great, it's beneficial, it's safe, you should be doing it. For those individuals who can't, those individuals who develop specific complications, those individuals who, have really terrible morning sickness that, doesn't just happen in the first trimester. My sister-in-law was sick throughout her entire pregnancy. She just wasn't able to exercise. It's, and sort of balancing between the two, but we really have to get away from what are the harms of being active to what are the harms of not being active. And so I think that's where the 2019 guideline and the systematic reviews sort of really shined through and shone a light that the evidence is strong enough now that we can really say that.
Yeah.
The second most important thing is that, this is more from a research perspective, I think, than anything else, is that it's important to me and to other researchers around the world that we know what the questions are that pregnant individuals, clinicians have. Where can we help? I have my pet ideas. I'm super curious about, how the sympathetic nervous system changes with exercise during pregnancy, and what are the underlying mechanisms that help to reduce the risk of preeclampsia with exercise. Does that make any sense to the average person? Not
Right.
a chance. My mom doesn't understand it. But, when we're doing research, I think it's really important that we get the patient and clinician perspective, so that I'm answering questions that are relevant to the people who are actually using the guidelines and using the evidence. So get involved. Like, I get emails. I got an email from, she was a PhD student. She is also a CrossFitter, doing a lot of work, and she became pregnant. She was lifting heavy weights, doing CrossFit during pregnancy. So she emailed me and she was like, hey, do you want to do a study? I have this question about this. And I'm like, I don't know who you are, but absolutely.
You're like, yes, whatever the question is, yes.
It's like, great. And so, again, she was a physiotherapist. And so she had the access to
That's awesome.
the patient population that I would never, ever be able to reach. And so that study basically flew through, and we're going to be able to start to have some of the first evidence on CrossFit during pregnancy.
That's amazing.
But making those connections are really, really tough. So that's why I do podcasts and do Instagram, because the reach is so incredible.
Yeah. No, I think it makes it so much more important that we're all kind of in this together. I mean, moms want their questions answered. We as clinicians want to be able to give the best possible care. And you guys as researchers want to be able to give the answers whenever possible. So it really is, it's a very symbiotic relationship if we all get in the same space. So I love that. I love that. For you, any last thing that, anyone that you're looking for right now?
Oh, actually, yes. So, we have been really trying to push the boundaries a little bit more in terms of what we understand regarding exercise during pregnancy. So we've been tackling specific populations, looking at moms with cardiac disease during pregnancy. Nobody's ever looked at this before in terms of exercise. Looking at twin pregnancy and exercise in twin pregnancies, high intensity exercise in pregnancy, heavy weightlifting, that sort of thing.
Right.
But the one survey that we're doing right now is looking at long duration exercise. So we're looking specifically for pregnant or individuals who were pregnant and engaged in 60 or more minutes per session at any point during their pregnancy. We just have no information really beyond about 45 minutes exercise duration currently. And we know that there are lots of women who want to run half marathons during their pregnancy. And so this is sort of our first step to better understand the impact, not only on, birth outcomes, but also on mental health, also on pelvic floor, to start to be able to build the evidence. And that's basically where we start. Is we try to do these surveys, see what the impacts are, what the questions are going to be coming from that particular area, so that we can do those in-person physiological assessments. So it's the first step in the long process.
That's fantastic.
But,
as
participants.
As you were talking, I was literally thinking of my friend Whitney Hines. She goes by the Mother Runners. She just did a post recently on did you train for a marathon while you were pregnant? And there was like a bajillion comments and stuff afterwards. Like, I can't imagine doing it with my oldest. I think I finally stopped at 19 weeks. I was like, no, this isn't going to happen, and forget it with my second. But there are people that do this, which is amazing. And I was like, oh, you guys need to get connected, or we need to get you over to those people. So I'm like, because it's a select group of people that don't think it's crazy to do those sort of things. You're like, no, this is my jam. I want more information about this. So we just got to get you all together now. Awesome.
So fabulous.
Cool. All right. So we'll get all the links in the show notes if you want to get back in touch, and if you want to see a little bit more of what Margie's putting out, you can find her on Instagram, Exercise and Pregnancy. Thank you so much, Margie. I appreciate all the work that you do, all the works to come, and for thinking so much ahead 10 years ago to be like, hey, this is a thing. We need to have more information here. So as a clinician and as a mom, I thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to talk with you today.
Thank you.